morning. We are live. Go ahead and let me know in the chat down below. Make sure audio is good to go. If not, start sending me like weird hands like, hey, fix your stuff. In the meantime, I figured I would start off this morning by a poem or two, because why not? This one's called Hat. Teddy said it was a hat, so I put it on. Now Dad is saying, where the heck's the toilet plunger gone? Next one, my rules. If you want to marry me, here's what you'll have to do. You must learn how to make a perfect chicken dumpling stew, and you must sew my holy socks, and soothe my troubled mind, and develop the knack for scratching my back, and keep my shoes spotlessly shined. And while I rest, you must rake up the leaves, and when it's hailing and snowing, you must shovel the walk, and be still when I talk. And hey, where are you going? That's what happens when there's a lot. Last one. Warning. Inside everybody's nose, there lives a sharp-toothed snail. So if you stick your finger in, he may bite off your nail. Stick it farther up inside, and he may bite your ring off. Stick it all the way, and he may bite your whole darn thing off. Where the Sidewalk Guns. Michelle Silverstein. Probably my favorite book of all time. Well, good morning. Good morning. I think, is audio all right there?
I think so.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What's up, my people? All right. Well, we're going to get rolling here. You know, last week, I think on Sunday, I'm not sure, can I still call it Sunday right now? I just call every day. So, last day, tomorrow day, it's just every day is the same, so we're just stuck here with day. I'm pretty sure it was Sunday. I'm pretty sure today is Sunday. I could be wrong. Let me know if I am. But we talked about God using David, how he saw David, and then God used David. And God saw David actually in a time of isolation, which is pretty familiar to where we are at now, when he was spending so much time alone in the fields with the animals, really, which I don't know about you guys, but I have found some extra comfort in this season with my dog, with my crested gecko. Last night I was holding my gecko just to feel like I got to hang out with someone new. But it's just so that time where we're desperate for comfort typically. So I don't know if any of you guys are finding more time hanging out with your dogs or cats or whoever you hang out with. So, you know, David basically, God saw David in the field. God promotes David, brings him out of the field into the kingdom, and right before then, David kills Goliath, takes Goliath's head off with his own sword. That's pretty cool. David actually takes that sword, actually donates it to a bunch of priests. I don't know if you knew that. He gave it to the priests, kind of this thing. There's like these priests lived in the tent, about 85 of them, so he gave them Goliath's sword to say, hey, here's symbolic of God's victory, which I found pretty neat, especially for maybe what we're going to talk about here, that God's had some major victories even in our life. And so hopefully we can remember some of those today. But God pulls David out of the fields and puts him in the kingdom. In fact, he gets anointed to become the king. He'll be the next king. And there's just one current problem. See, a few years go by, David becomes super successful, and the current King Saul, gets super jealous and kind of starts to lose it up top with this paranoia that David's going to try to kill him, that David wants his throne, that he's trying to take it now, that he's trying to undermine him. And so he decides that he probably should try to kill David before David can get the best of him. And so he decides to try to do just that. And David finds himself walking through the kingdom and dodging spears, as the king literally threw a spear at him at one point, and David had to dodge it, which I'm hanging out with my friend Bridget this morning. Bridget, I don't know if you ever feel that way. Hopefully not, because you're at our house. But there's times where I feel like I'm walking by even family, and if you say the wrong thing at the right time or the wrong time, right? Some of you guys might have siblings, sisters or brothers or even parents, or sometimes you just say something in the wrong tone and it's like wham! So you got to dodge those spears. But David knew then that God put Saul in charge, and David, although he probably wanted to pick that spear up and throw it back at King Saul and just end it right then and there, he didn't. David actually made the choice to kind of flee for his own life, for his own safety, and wait for God's timing. Just like he was back in the field, he chose to be faithful and live in God's timing. And so a lot of us, we feel like these days can be long, although I feel like the days are like going by fast because I can never keep track of what day it is, but each day seems to be long. So maybe the hours are long and the days are short. I don't even know how to word that anymore. But David found himself having to relive kind of his past of going, man, I have to now jump back into a time of isolation where I'm away from the king, I'm away from the kingdom, I'm away from family, and he actually fled. And on his way out of town, guess where David stopped? David stopped by some of his old friends, the priests, who really didn't have a need for a sword anymore. And before David kind of ran to the caves, he actually found himself finding Goliath's old sword that he kind of gave to the king. To the priest, and brought it with him. And so the priest gave it back to him. And I don't know if David, maybe because David actually needed a weapon, he didn't have time to grab weapons on his way out of the kingdom. But I think more than anything, David needed the reminder of God's victory in his life. And so I just think maybe for us, do we know what those reminders are? Do we have reminders in our life of going, can we look back and go, God, what have you done in my life? Where have you been faithful? What have you done that has helped me be victorious? And so, I'm going to adjust this quick here. And I think sometimes we need to remember in our own journey, man, God, this is where you have shown your faithfulness. Maybe you were sick and you felt like God healed you. Maybe you watched that happen to someone else and a family member. Maybe he just rescued you from a situation. Maybe there's some part of your testimony that maybe you used to make really bad decisions, and by the grace of God, your life turned around and you're in a whole different spot now. Or maybe you watched something traumatic happen in your family and God get involved and personally change that scenario around. Maybe you can just think about sitting in God's presence and how life just seems to drastically change when you get to hang out with the creator of the universe. And so David stayed so positive. And I think there were plenty of times where he probably looked at Goliath's sword and remembered the giant obstacle that was in front of him. But how when choosing faithfulness in God, he got to find that peace. He got to find that comfort that God is who he says he is, and that you can be who he says you are. I just think that's a major, major thing. So David stayed positive by focusing on the power of what God has already done and never limiting what God can do in the future. So I think one question is, what is your Goliath sword? Can you picture that? Can you think about that? What is your go-to thought when you have to remember what God has done in your life? So as David took his sword and he kind of went out to the caves, there was like a whole cool cave system. I don't know, this might be more of a conversation right now, but there was a whole cool cave system that was like a hideaway fortress in the mountains, kind of away. And that's where David began to take refuge. And slowly but surely, kind of his men that were loyal to him, that wanted to be part of his army, started to join him. But they were away from civilization. They were away from all the commodities. They were away from, where you get even your food. And so it was at this time, which would seem like such a disadvantage, that David began to discover and learn a whole lot of things that God already had around him. So David began to see and learn to utilize what God had already, the situation, the scenario, and the setting that God placed him in, how to begin to use that. And so, I mean literally, he learned how to make weapons like Goliath's sword. See, the Philistines were already using a different technique than the Israelites. The Israelites had come from generations of really being slaves and then trying to learn how to be farmers and trying to figure out how to be soldiers. Most of their weapons at that point had come from farming weapons. But it's hard because a lot of that, the material used was more of like a brass. It was too soft and pliable, malleable, that when it would take a hit from another sword, it would just gouge out, a lot of times even just break. And so they started to use new materials, new metals found in the earth, but it was like iron. So the hard part is they didn't know the process of treating that iron and turning it into actual steel, and the tempering process of how you'd make a proper sword. And so that steel a lot of times would just break when they would hit another sword. And so that's what made the battle so difficult. But here David, now having Goliath's sword and being around different opportunities, different cultures, different environments, got to literally begin to see how to utilize those things. And so David learned in this time frame of his life, away from everybody else, that God had taken literally his light, the sunlight, put that sunlight into the trees, right? We learned about this in science. And when those trees were cut down, the wood, when you burn the wood, what burns off of the wood? Different gases. That gas is known as carbon. And so when David left that steel in the fire longer, the carbon actually burns out of the wood and absorbs into the steel. It's known as carbon steel. And it was a much harder tempered steel than any of the weapons that Saul or anybody else could fight with. What became as one of the biggest disadvantages of being kicked out of the kingdom became David's biggest advantage ever of learning how to use proper metals and steel. He now had the same type of steel that places like Rome had the greatest empire on earth at the time, and could fight on a whole new level. All this because he took advantage of his disadvantage. He took advantage of his isolation. And instead of being overwhelmed with emotion, instead of being overwhelmed with the fear of missing out, instead of being overwhelmed with the thought process of being abandoned or feeling like God has now overlooked him, instead he sought to figure out, man, what can I learn in this time? How can I stay up and up? How can I stay positive in this time frame and make the most out of it instead of just being crushed, being dismayed? In fact, there are times even when you read the book of Psalms, you'll see there are times where David was overwhelmed. David was sad. David was kind of grief-struck and feeling like, God, have you abandoned me? But at the same time, instead of letting those emotions take over, David began to pray. David, in fact, he even began to sing. He began to worship. He began to lift up God's name. And for a lot of us, it might be just realizing that there are opportunities for us to do that. So, how about some personal challenges, okay? Instead of being lost and alone, how can, we be intentional in growing in this season? What skill sets do we want to learn in this season that we might walk out of isolation and back into our normal everyday? At this point, I think school's probably just done. So they're doing these online school things, and it's a weird dynamic. So this next bit is probably summer. What are you going to walk into summer having learned? How will you come out better through this period of isolation than maybe you walked into? I'm going to end here in just a second, and I'm going to pass it to Gidge, who's going to give us some awesome takeaways and applications of what to do from here. But I want to end with this thought process, okay? There's an old saying that says, loneliness is God's cry for intimacy. And if you've been around for a decent amount of time, then you've probably heard that at some point. So knowing that God is longing for us to grow closer to him, how can we do that and become an even better version of ourselves in this time where oftentimes we feel so disconnected from maybe our social circles or from our people? And how do we instead reach out and go, God, how can we give you everything we have in this time frame? And how can we connect to you more than ever before? But also, how can we make sure that we're healthy, that we're in a good spot, that we are moving forward, that we're on the up and up, just like David was amongst the biggest trials. So I'm going to have Gidge jump up here. I'm going to jump on the chat with you guys, and we'll go from there. Aha! Let's go, Gidge.
Hey, what's up, guys? Oh my gosh, Garrett had so many awesome things to say, and I just get to piggyback on that, kind of give you guys some practicals as to how to stay healthy, how to grow closer to God, and all of those things. So there's really 4 things that I think we're going to focus on, and Garrett's going to pop it up on the screen here. So the 4 things are pray, listen, laugh, and explore. So I'm just going to break those down for you guys. Like I said, they're right up there in case you forget. But I'm going to break them down just so you have a better idea of how to do these things practically during the season. So the first one would be prayer. And guys, prayer is so incredibly important. And I'm sure that you've heard that before. But I also know that prayer can kind of seem daunting because you're like, okay, prayer's a really big word. I don't really know what prayer is. How do I pray? Like, what does this look like, right? But prayer is actually super simple, and it's literally just talking to God and having a conversation with him. And kind of like what you do with a friend, or like when me and Garrett talk, it's like I talk to God the same way that I talk to Garrett. And I'm just like, hey, these are the highlights of my day. This is what went really good. This is what I was excited about today. Or on the opposite end of being like, hey, God, I'm just really struggling with this today. Like, I'm a little confused about this. And you just begin to have a conversation. You begin to dialogue with God just like you would a friend, and begin to talk to him. So it's just kind of a combination of telling him about your day, of asking for help, of asking him to challenge you. And it doesn't really matter how long you pray, and it doesn't really matter what you say. The whole point of prayer is, again, just to talk to God, just to establish that relationship with him. So if you want to talk to God and pray to God for an hour, go for it. But if you're like, hey, I have 5 minutes while I'm like stressing out before I'm going to do this homework, or hey, I have 5 minutes in between Zoom calls, talk to God then. It doesn't have to be a super big extravagant thing. He's literally just like, hey, I just want to talk to you. Like, I want to hang out with you. Like, do you ever have that friend where you just like literally cannot wait to hang out with? You just like look at your mom and your dad, and you're like, can I please go hang out with them today, or like stay the night at their house, or whatever it is. Like, God has that same feeling towards you, and he's like, can you please just talk to me today? Like, I'm so excited to hang out with you and hear from you. So just a challenge for you guys, talk to God for like 15 minutes every day. I think that's a really good starting point. If 15 minutes is too much for you at the beginning, break it up. Do 5 minutes when you wake up, 5 minutes in the middle of the day, and 5 minutes before you go to bed. But if you're like, no, I can do that, like me and God, we're good. Like, try to up that a little bit, because there's so much growth that can happen when you just begin to talk to God. And if you get distracted while you pray, because I totally know that I'm somebody that does that, a really helpful way would just be writing out your prayers. So it keeps you focused and keeps you not distracted. So, like, I challenge you, put your phone away. Like, don't be on your laptop, don't have the TV on. If that's, like, literally the only opportunity you get, then sure, go for it. But if you're somebody who gets easily distracted, I would, like, super challenge you just to write out your prayers and just to talk to him. On the flip side of that, though, if you're going to talk to God like he's your friend, you have to listen to God like he's your friend. So that would be point 2, would be to listen. Because if you have a one-sided conversation, it doesn't really work very well. Like, if I just sat here and talked to Garrett for like 20 minutes and didn't give him a chance to speak at all, it'd be really unbeneficial, and at that point I should literally just like go and talk to a wall, because he's getting the same effect as a wall would have, because he doesn't get to respond. So I think in the same way, God really wants you to give him a chance to speak back. So listening. I think one way that you can do that is literally just taking 5, 10, 15 minutes and just opening a journal or sitting with a blank piece of paper and asking, God, what do you want to say back to me right now? And it's usually not an audible voice. I've never had it be an audible voice. But it's just a feeling or an idea or a thought, something that God just kind of places on your heart. And you just kind of begin to sit in that and begin to think about that. Just a couple of questions that I have for you guys. When's the last time that you just sat in silence? Without a phone, without a TV, without music, but just finding a quiet space and just allowing your mind to wander for a little bit. See, our society and our culture is really, really good at entertaining us, right? We have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have Facebook for those of you guys that use that. There's Snapchat. There's so many things that we're constantly inputting into our lives. So sometimes it's really good to just take a couple of minutes and just sit in silence and not be taking things in, but just to try to listen to what God has to say, just allowing your mind to wander. And I think when you allow that time to happen, that's when God speaks. And you have to have patience for this too, because a lot of us want to go really quick and just be like, oh, I didn't hear God after 30 seconds of sitting here, so he doesn't want to talk to me. Like, no, just let it breathe for a little bit. Just give yourself some space and some time to listen, because I promise you during the season, when you go after God, it says in James 4:8, when you draw near to God, he's going to draw near to you. So continue to draw near to God, continue to give him that time to speak, and he will. So those are 2 things you can do spiritually in this time to like grow your relationship with God. But I also think there's 2 things that we can do just to stay healthy as people, right? It doesn't all have to be spiritual stuff. The next one, the third one, is laugh. So the best question that I have for you guys is, what's making you laugh in this season? Is it the funny dog videos that you're seeing on YouTube or on TikTok or on Instagram? That's for sure me, like I said last week. I love the dog videos. Is it your friends? Is it your family? Like, comment in the chat, like, Garrett's on, so comment in the chat things that are making you laugh, because it's also really good to share those things with other people. Like, if you see a funny video or if you hear a funny joke, like, share it with somebody so they can laugh too. There's a lot of really good benefits for laughing. A couple of them. So one, it reduces stress, and I know during this season, especially being stuck at home, there's probably a little bit more stress than normal, so it reduces stress. It makes you happier. Like, have you ever, like, had somebody come up to you and they're like, okay, don't smile, you're not going to smile, try not to smile, and you instantly start smiling, right? And when you start laughing, you just instantly get happier. It releases what's called endorphins, so it makes you happier. And this is my personal favorite. When you laugh, you scientifically start to develop abs, okay? So if you're a guy or if you're a girl and you're like, I want some better abs in my life, oh my gosh, start laughing, because that will help you out significantly. But for real, laughter is so good for you. Find ways to laugh by yourself. Find ways to laugh with your friends. Find ways to laugh with your family. This is a really good way to develop community too. Laughter brings people together, and it's just so good for you. And the last thing, explore. Get out of the house, because if you're anything like me, it's really easy to just want to stay inside because it's warm and comfortable. But for real, go explore, go do something. You've probably never had this much free time to just do silly things and to have fun, right? So don't keep yourself cooped up. When you change your environment, so many things can happen. You get to be more creative. You get to explore. You get to start just unlocking new things. When you change your atmosphere, like, your perspective can shift too. So there's so many fun things about going out and exploring. And it doesn't have to be like a crazy, like, 5-mile walk, right? Like, I'm sure your mom has probably been like, okay, kids, let's go for a walk. Or if you've seen those TikToks where it's like, yeah, my mom made me walk 30 laps today or whatever. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy like that. It can be fun stuff too. So I have a couple of challenges for you guys, or a couple of examples of fun things you can do. Fun things you can do to explore around the house. One, who can build the best fort out of sticks that they find in the yard? And so, like, literally, just go pick up sticks around your yard. I'm sure there's a lot of them. Like, Garrett and Rachel and I and the kids were outside these past couple of days, and they had sticks all over because we're about to transition into spring. So pick up sticks, like, so you can build the biggest pile for a bonfire or something. I think a really funny one would be try to draw Cameron's face out of rocks that you find. Like, that's so random, so silly, right? Who can climb the highest in a tree? Who can beat their dog in a race? Who can draw the best picture in their driveway with chalk? Like, it doesn't have to be super extravagant, but allow the creativity to flow a little bit and just do something new, do something exciting. Go explore, go hang out with people. Just get creative with it. So when you do those things, make sure to tag our social media, which is City First Youth 678 on Instagram. And if you do these things, we'll shout you out, we'll repost you. There's also some really cool giveaways that we could be giving out, a care package, if you do these things. So it has a whole bunch of fun goodies in it. But yeah, tag us in that. And if you get the care package, we're going to deliver it straight to your door. So if you have no other motivation to get outside besides a care package, do it, because it's so, so, so cool. But yeah, for real, take those 4 things to heart and just think about it. They're not super hard. They're not really difficult. But I'm just going to pray us out really quick. And then Garrett's just going to jump back on for a quick second. We're going to close out. So, yeah, if you could just pray with me really quick. Dear Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity to still get to hang out and to be in community even when we don't get to see each other face to face. Lord, I'm so grateful for what you're doing. Help us to have a mind of thankfulness, God. Challenge us to do these things, Lord. I'm sure some of them come easy and some of them don't. So whatever ones are really challenging for us, God, I just pray that you give us the strength and the courage to try these new things, to develop our relationship with you, to be creative in ways that we haven't been before. God, I pray that you give us strength and peace as we continue out our week, that you help us with all of the homework that we have, that you help us with dealing with our parents and our siblings in ways that we normally don't have to. But yeah, God, just give us strength and continue to challenge us and to stir something up inside of us where we want to do better and where we want to make the most out of our time. So thank you for everything that you're doing, Lord. In your name, amen. So.
Yes. I just wanted to say that we'll see you tonight, hopefully, because we have our discussion tonight on Zoom. So that information will be coming out soon. I think we're just going to post it on our Insta. Or if you already have that info, I don't know, Cam, Hannah. Otherwise, you guys text it out. I don't know how you guys get the information out there. Send a raven, attach it to a bird, and release it. And then it'll just drop on your doorstep, the Zoom ID and or password. So we love you guys. Thanks for hanging out and joining us on MSE TV. And we will see you later. I'm going to hit this end stream, and hopefully it ends at the end of this. Not like wherever it's at right now, because I think we're like 30 seconds in the future.
Oh, yeah.
So in 30 seconds, they're going to hear me say the future.
The future.
The future. So good luck. Also, let me know if you need more poems or if this was the worst idea ever. I happen to love them. And if you missed the beginning, we read a couple to start the stream. So
Go watch them.
yeah, love ya.
Bye, guys. We love you so much. And if you can still see me waving,